The Great Lakes are vast, unpredictable inland seas. They are notorious for weather shifts so sudden and severe that they can tear apart massive vessels. On a clear summer day, the coastal areas look perfectly serene, but just beneath that glassy surface lies a freezing, aggressive turbulence that can pull a swimmer under or capsize a small boat in seconds. Long before modern meteorology or sonar could scan the depths and predict these storms, the original Native American inhabitants navigated this environment daily. Survival required a deep respect for these invisible aquatic dangers. You can't fight a current, and you can't reason with freezing temperatures. To safely navigate a habitat this lethal, early humans gave the water a face, mapping the physical dangers of the lake into tangible spiritual monsters. Here on the granite cliffs of Agawa Rock, we find one of those faces. This is a centuries-old piece of red ochre art painted by Ojibwe spiritual leaders. They called it Mishipishu, the underwater panther, a chimera combining feline paws, bull horns, and a spiked dragon body. Those physical traits were chosen with purpose. The sharp spikes and aggressive horns represent sudden, violent wave turbulence, directly associating this creature with the threat of death by drowning. The Ojibwe utilized these paintings as literal hazard signs. They marked dangerous routes for anyone attempting to cross the deep water. It is easy to look at faded paint on a rock and write it off as ancient superstition, but when new navigators arrived on these waters and ignored those warnings, that lack of knowledge left them vulnerable to the physical reality of the lake. By the late 18th century, European settlers began pushing into the Great Lakes. They navigated through the thick fog and dark waters, unaware of the ancient warnings carved into the stone behind them. Almost immediately, the encounters began. In 1793, the captain of a sloop named Felicity was hunting ducks on Lake Erie when he startled a massive beast with a snake-like neck. He estimated it was over 16 feet long and documented the sighting in his logs. By 1817, the sightings escalated into direct physical confrontations. One boat crew reported firing their muskets at a 60-foot, copper-colored serpent. The bullets had no visible effect. That same year, two French settlers walking a beach near Toledo stumbled upon a 30-foot monster writhing in the sand. They described it as possessing the body of a giant sturgeon, but with bizarre arm-like appendages. The reports continued for decades, culminating in the summer of 1892 when an entire steamship crew watched a 50-foot serpent emerge from violently foaming waters, thrashing about as if wrestling an invisible enemy. As record-keeping moved from stone to paper, the perception of the creature changed. The spiritual warnings of the past were now being mirrored in physical, biological logbooks. Faced with a growing pile of written testimony, 19th-century scientists attempted to rationalize these encounters. If these experienced sailors weren't lying, there had to be a biological precedent for what they were seeing. They proposed the creature, South Bay Bessie, was a surviving plesiosaur, adapting to a cold, freshwater environment. Ecologically, the math works. Lake Erie's enormous biomass of walleye and salmon provides the exact food supply required for this massive aquatic predator. But despite the plausible ecological model and the stacks of naval logbooks, the broader public dismissed these accounts as the tall tales of weary sailors. Written testimony alone was not enough to turn a myth into a fact in the modern era. That skepticism held strong until the late 20th century. During this period, the burden of proof shifted away from subjective human memory and onto objective technological sensors. The mass adoption of the household camcorder meant sightings were no longer limited to the memories of sailors. They were being recorded by mechanical eyes. If something was out there in the water, the lens would eventually catch it. You would expect the monster myths to evaporate under the scrutiny of a video camera. Instead, the exact opposite happened. The anomaly was caught on tape. The broadcast of this footage sparked a massive media frenzy. This visual data brought the mystery to a national audience, drawing coverage from major programs and forcing a skeptical public to look at the water again. Despite the centuries between them, these digital sensors are tracking a persistent phenomenon.
large, unexplained shapes moving through the depths. If modern lenses are detecting the same anomalies indigenous leaders recorded on rocks millennia ago, we have to reconsider our mastery of the natural world. Advancing our documentation technology didn't erase the ancient monsters of the Great Lakes. It only moved them out of the folklore and placed them right into our living rooms.
The Great Lakes are freezing, deep water environments driven by oceanic forces. They contain sheer drop-offs and unpredictable weather systems that mimic the open sea. For hundreds of years, the lethal danger of these waters meant that any evidence of what lived beneath the surface relied entirely on human eyesight and spoken lore. That physical vastness created a permanent informational void. Out there, in hundreds of feet of dark water, ancient myths thrived indefinitely, without ever colliding with scientific scrutiny. Long before European settlement, Ojibwe spiritual leaders recorded these encounters. This red ochre painting at Agawa Rock depicts Mishipishu, the underwater panther, featuring a distinct heavily spined and horned design. When the industrial shipping era arrived, the sightings continued. The creatures adapted to a new audience of commercial sailors, navigating these exact treacherous routes. We have detailed logs from the summer of 1892, where an entire crew stood on the deck of a commercial schooner and watched a 50-foot serpent wrestle the surface waters of Lake Erie. Those written accounts remained the only evidence available until the late 20th century, when the consumer camcorder boom suddenly put a lens in everyone's hand. With this new technology, society was suddenly equipped to test the myths. Centuries of oral history and sailor logs could finally be weighed against recorded video. By the 1990s, cheap handheld recording gear meant anyone on a weekend fishing trip was suddenly capable of documenting the water around them. The resulting frenzy peaked in 1997. Amateur video surfaced showing an undulating serpent in Lake Erie, a creature locals called Bessie, and the footage escalated quickly to national news networks. But if we bypass the media hype and apply strict visual analysis to the lake's native ecosystem, a much clearer picture emerges. Lake Erie is densely populated. Native walleye and lake sturgeon regularly measure several feet in length, and they frequently travel in tight, clustered schools right at the surface. When those large schooling fish move in unison, and their wakes intersect with a boat's path and the prevailing wind, the water distorts. It creates the precise optical illusion of a single winding serpent breaking the waves. The first wave of consumer cameras documented biological optical illusions, capturing the behavior of the lake's existing inhabitants, rather than proof of a monster. To find compelling evidence, we have to look east to the sixth Great Lake, Lake Champlain. This deep, narrow trench is home to a cryptid so consistently reported that local governments passed resolutions to protect it. In 1993, a Japanese television crew arrived at the lake. Instead of pointing blurry consumer lenses at the surface, they dropped state-of-the-art tracking sonar into the depths. This sonar display shows the expedition's result. Deep below, the equipment pinged massive, moving biological anomalies. Marine biology cannot dismiss this data. The targets are mathematically too large to be sturgeon, and their movement instantly rules out sunken logs. When advanced sensors cut through the surface waves and eliminate optical illusions, the mystery doesn't vanish. It retreats into deeper, genuinely unexplainable territory. But that disciplined sonar search was a brief window. As we crossed into the new millennium, the investigation fractured into a chaotic race for viral fame, driven by cheap trail cameras and underwater baits. This environment produced widespread digital hoaxes, like the viral photographs of a 21-foot giant freshwater squid that supposedly washed up on Lake Michigan's shores. It took marine biologists only a brief visual analysis to dismantle the panic. The massive squid was nothing more than a clever arrangement of sea kelp carefully laid over dark rocks. The fabricator made a fatal geographical error. The sandy beaches of Lake Michigan are devoid of naturally occurring black volcanic rocks, and freshwater lakes do not produce sea kelp. As digital tools became more accessible, the priority shifted toward viral engagement. Credible investigation was largely replaced by fabrications designed for internet clicks.
That flood of modern internet hoaxes and debunked VHF tapes makes it incredibly easy to discard centuries of historical logs. We convince ourselves that modern technology has mapped every inch of the natural world, but that confidence shatters when you stand at the edge of these pitch-black inland seas. We still don't know if the anomalies tracked on sonar are surviving prehistoric relics, hiding deep in the trenches, or simply the physical projection of humanity's primal fear of deep water.
Perhaps the exact biological classification matters less than the raw terror these massive ecosystems naturally command. Somewhere out there, under hundreds of feet of freezing, unexplored water, the legends refuse to drown. Sensors can strip away the simple surface illusions, yet the deepest reaches of these lakes remain silent and unexplored.